Bloody biscuits. There it goes. So sorry, friends. I just did an update on something and it broke everything. So hi, welcome, welcome to this. I just did an update to the Stream Deck, which is where I have all my macros set up, and now nothing's working. So that's going to be fun to fix. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie Podcast. I, as always, am your co-host Brian, and joining us, as always, is your co-host Spaz.
I am the Keymaster. But I am not the Gatekeeper.
God damn it. Your co-host Julie.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey. Your co-host Thorsten.
Hello, hello.
And your co-host Jacob.
Sorry, no quote today. Way too high temperature.
What's the
fair?
What is the temperature over there in Poland right
You're
now?
American, you wouldn't know, but it's close to I think 40 degrees outside.
I've got converters.
Celsius.
Hang on. 40 degrees C to okay, so that's 104. Woo! Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
It's a bit. But that is outside, at least.
That was the temperature here yesterday. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little closer to the coast, thankfully. So it's only going up to the high 70s, thank God. But you know,
exactly, Luke. Too many degrees. Way too many degrees.
Yeah, I mean, living in the coast is great for now, but then the floods will come, and that'll be that. And so,
anyways,
so friends, I don't remember who was the one that suggested today's topic. Was it Spaz or Julie? Okay, it was Spaz. All right, so Spaz, do you mind taking the lead on this one?
I do not mind.
All right, go for it.
So this came up as a topic during the accessibility podcast I was having with Julie, and the topic of gatekeeping, because people who have certain disabilities get kind of pushed out. So that is hand in hand with gatekeeping, as people who don't have any sort of considerations, they don't have any sort of frame of reference, to use that phrase. And so they don't exactly have the empathy one would hope that they should have. And because of that, they take a degree of tribalism to the spaces that they inhabit. They build their identity around whatever that thing is. And if anything seems like a threat to that, they gatekeep and try to push people out of those spaces.
Yeah, they do this on
basis of gender or on race or on disability. They do it with the phrase "get good," because for some people, they can't get good. There's a skill ceiling that they're not able to reach. And so there are all sorts of ways in which people who would otherwise be welcomed feel pushed out by people who are being assholes. And that's what started the topic.
Sorry, I was muted. That's fair, because I was drinking. That's fair. I always think of gatekeeping as a clubhouse of 8-year-olds that says no girls allowed. That's how I always envision, gatekeeping as a treehouse or something
like a pillow fort.
Yeah, a pillow fort. Yeah, exactly, or a blanket fort that says no girls allowed. Because it's that level of maturity, right? It's that level of emotional intelligence.
And also that level of tribalism, because tribalism does factor into it. It's an identity thing that this is our space, and it came up during Gamergate. It came up during a lot of issues that have sprung up over the years, and I don't have to go into all of them in great detail. But yeah, Gamergate was a big thing about this. It was about keeping women out of spaces that were thought of by certain individuals as being spaces for white men.
You can't just call them gamers. We do that nowadays.
Well, no, because even that is gatekeeping in itself. Because, as I wrote in our general course channel earlier, if you play games and you consider yourself a gamer, then you are a gamer, and nobody else gets to define that for you.
Yeah, like one of my good friends, Marcia, joined the server for this topic, and she said something like, I'm not as much of a gamer as you guys because I only play this one mobile game. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. You play a game, you're a gamer. That's it. It doesn't matter the game you play or how much you play it or whatever. Like,
and the same applies to fandom. Exactly. If you like that thing, then you are a fan, and nobody else gets to tell you you're not enough of a fan because you don't know this bit of trivia or because you got a detail wrong. No, don't do that. That's bad.
This is why on the same podcast Spaz was talking about, one of the other co-hosts brought up the fact that he used to have a podcast called Too Lazy to Be Otaku. And basically being that, he likes anime, but he's not a fanboy, he's not a Japanophile, so, quit badgering him about it. And, the thing is, I've encountered things like this in, when you're talking about modern combat games, and I've had people say, well, there are no women here because there's no women in modern combat, and it's like, after I quit laughing, it's like, women have been in combat in the United States since 2016 and a lot longer in other countries. And that's what you try and deal with, where they think, oh, well, combat is it's just a male thing, but yet there are also examples of positive gatekeeping, and in real life anyway. Think about the idea of a moderator of a forum, or in my case, when I'm a gatekeeper, when I stop people from stealing money from Uncle Sam. So
okay, that's a good point. So I guess we're here to talk about the more negative aspects of gatekeeping,
right.
Not the because the term gatekeeping usually has a negative connotation anyway. But you're right. There is positive. There are forms of positive gatekeeping, like our docking ring on our Discord server. That's a form of positive gatekeeping where we actually
mostly there to keep out the bots, because that's mostly what it's there for. But still.
And also to keep out people who think we're a Discord server for a specific game. Like when
there is another game with a similar name to our community.
Space Junkies.
Space Junkies. Yeah, and we had a whole bunch of people.
Oh my god!
Over the last 5 years or so, who joined and think it was a server for that.
Nope.
Yeah, that was.
We're a bit more varied here. I don't even know what that game is.
It was a VR game.
It's a VR game. It's by Ubisoft. I think.
I don't know who published it.
I think it was Ubisoft, and I don't think it actually went anywhere. I think it bombed.
It might have. I don't know. Yeah. Honestly,
there was some hype about it for a while, and then crickets. like you noticed, we didn't get any more people on the Discord server looking for the game.
In the last couple of years, we haven't had anyone asking about it.
Not surprised. What the hell is it? Okay, utterly, never mind. Just complete vaporware. I don't care. Anyways, also, yes, to keep out people who shill for crypto, because people seem to be trying to do that here.
Oh my god, what was it the other day? Oh, I want to support your project with crypto.
Define project.
People in China love crypto. Like, no thanks. And then
that was during a podcast, in fact. So that person got insta banned.
Oh god. Yeah.
Now, I will note, I think that happened because we had one developer on here who was promoting a game that was related to blockchain. And we have not had that person on since, and we will never have another game that promotes blockchain as part of what we do on this podcast.
Anything.
Or anything with our community. Yeah, really. They can do it, but they just can't promote it on our server or in our community.
You know what makes me sad about that? Side
I'm
note,
listening.
the guy who made Jumpgate, my favorite MMO, he's making a new space game. He's making a new space game called Warp Nexus, and it is super
Is that one?
blockchain NFT enabled bullshit. And it's like, oh no.
So yes, gatekeeping has its benefits.
Yeah,
but you need a very specific reason for it and a very specific framework for why you keep certain people out.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And I'm a big believer in the mentality of two things. First, you get the community that you cultivate. So if you keep the bigots out, they will not be able to make it a difficult place to be for marginalized people. And I've said this many times before. And the other part of it is, by keeping those people out, your community can grow and bring in more good people and keep that virtuous cycle going to where you only have good people in your community and it keeps on growing because of that reputation of being a good community to be in. And that's a good recursive cycle. It's a good kind of gatekeeping.
Yeah, I love our community so much, by the way. Thank you, everyone, for being as amazing as you are.
Am I allowed to do a tangent about moderation here
Dude,
and what constitutes good moderation?
Dude, we might as well call this tangent the podcast. Don't worry about it.
It's related. Go for it.
So, one thing that I often see in like people trying to moderate things, and they go for an approach that's basically like no arguments or no politics or whatever, which is. It suffers from the same problem as like how is it called? What's it called in English? It's like the thing where if someone's getting bullied at school, both people are at fault.
It's blaming the victim.
Policy.
Blaming the victim is part of that.
Zero tolerance policy.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Got it.
Essentially, you don't want like a no argument. Like a no argument policy, because while yes, some people might just be starting shit, some people also might genuinely be defending themselves from someone insulting them and calling them a wank, a twat, and I mean that's at that point you tell them to sit the fuck down. But usually it's not even that. Like as part of moderation, you kind of have to like be able to make a moral judgment and actually figure out from a moral standpoint what is better for your community. You can't just sit down and go, okay, everyone, just no fighting, just no fighting, everyone. This is the war room. I should have went with that one. Anyways, I actually recently watched Doctor Strangelove. It's really good. But okay, one tangent at a time. But the problem is a lot of times these sorts of rules are just a way for the moderators to go, well, I'm just going to tell everyone to stop arguing and tell everyone to stop and not actually like kick people off who are massively problematic because they're freaking forming a cult of, I don't know, hating women in one of the channels.
Well, if you want, I could expand on that point because...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. We used to have a rule on our Discord server and in our community about not talking politics at all. And
I think I was actually one of the few people that was like openly against it. After I got
you were.
Yeah. And we had that rule for quite a while. And when we rescinded that rule, we did so gladly because it was about time that it had happened. The part of it is because you may not consider our podcast to be art, and that's fine. I don't consider it art necessarily. It's a form of expression, but
I don't necessarily call it art. Definition.
This is
of course not.
This is not art.
No, but all art is political inherently, whether it has a message or not. Just because by expressing it itself, by having an expression to have out there, it is political in some way, shape, or form.
Also because political is inherently a very vague term that in the long term means either some variant of determines power dynamics, which with how things work out eventually devolves into anything people disagree on. Like,
yeah, you can go there, and that's and to expand on that even further, to say, oh, we are apolitical is also a political stance. So anyone who does that is lying through their teeth, because what they're actually saying is we like the status quo the way it is, and challenging that is going to rock the boat, and we don't want you rocking the boat.
Thank you for using the phrase "rock the boat," because that's exactly what I wanted to call it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It's if there's a problem that is going on behind the scenes and nobody's able to talk about it, then the status quo is going to remain. So if that status quo is hurting marginalized people on your server because they can't talk about what's going on, then yeah, you have a problem, and it's your policy of trying to stay quote unquote apolitical, even though that's exactly not what you're doing. So by openly taking a stand and saying, no, we're not going to try to stay apolitical, we're going to have open discussions here, and we may disagree, as long as we're respectful about it, nobody's going to get banned. Except for bigots, because, then bigots get banned.
So tangent number one.
Go.
What do you mean go? We just finished.
No, I mean, tangent number one, go.
Right. Okay, yeah, that is fair, Luke. It is nice to have places where you don't confront where the world, like places where the world sucks. But you typically do that by keeping people away. Like, how would I put this? You typically want to do that by keeping people who cause problems out of a place. Because people who cause problems, well, in a lot of places for a lot of reasons. I know that sounds maybe not redundant, like tautological, I guess, but it's how it is.
Well, in our Discord server, just so people who are listening to this and who haven't been on our Discord server will know, we have our politics section, which is mostly in talk about COVID as it relates to the rest of the world and us personally, as well as a channel for what's going on in Ukraine right now. And there's a lot of politics stuff on our server. But at the same time, it remains respectful, and people can have their opinions.
One thing I wanted to bring up is something that Spaz brought up on the other podcast, and this relates a lot to people who want to keep things the status quo. And I've encountered this a lot in real life. And people who want to keep things the status quo, they tend to be very alienated every time you encounter somebody or something that doesn't reflect the world the way they see it. And so one thing that Spaz brought up, and I have encountered this, like I said, in the real world outside gaming, where I've been subject to just sheer raw hate by gatekeepers. But when you think about gatekeeping, and I've had people make fun of me because of my vision before, because of my color blindness, and something Spaz said is, no matter who you are, ultimately you will need some sort of accessibility, and you will need somebody to open that gate that you've been keeping shut.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, a lack of empathy really causes a lot of this, I think.
Yeah, it does come down to a lack of empathy for other people, because it's all about me for certain people. And that's one of the reasons why they build this tribalistic mindset of, well, if it's not about me, I don't care. And that mentality is going to hurt others, regardless of whether or not it's intended. Because if you're keeping people out, then your community doesn't grow in a positive way. It ends up being a place where toxicity festers. And if you allow toxicity to fester, the people who aren't toxic will just leave. And then you're left with a 4chan, or as branched off of that, an 8chan, because the people there were too toxic for there. So it's bad enough that there are people who actually want to keep the toxicity flowing. There are people who feed off of that when they gatekeep, because they think, well, the world's already going to be terrible enough. I'm not making it worse. I'm just going with the flow and not making anything better, because it would take effort to make things better.
Though, can I chime in? Because if we're talking about causes of gatekeeping, the big one is, how do I put this?
Penises?
There's a comic I'll send in.
Is it penises? Is that the big cause of gatekeeping?
Not this time, Professor Freud.
Is it
not
dick?
This time.
Dick is the big...
Sometimes just a cigar is another man's penis.
All right, Professor Sigmund Freud, please sit down. As I was saying,
Please go ahead.
one of the big reasons that I see for gatekeeping is, like, if you ask a gatekeeper why do they do things, it is because why do they do it? It's because a lot of times people are afraid that their communities will somehow be lessened by the addition of other people. In that essentially there's the idea of the lowest common denominator. A lot of this happened. There is a reason why gaming communities are notorious for gatekeeping, is because they see the broadening of what is and isn't a gamer as the reason why games become shallower and more appealing to the lowest common denominator. And while that is partially correct, it is also, if anything, I would argue, victim blaming.
Yes.
Because it is not up to the audience to determine what the corporations do. Like, the corporations can make good games, they just choose not to. And fundamentally, what you're doing is forcing people out of a hobby when you should be blaming the people in charge. Well, people in charge of making things. And this is very important because you need to point out reasons why gatekeeping happens to stop it and counter it. You can't just say, oh, gatekeeping bad. It is bad. But why is it bad? And what causes it?
Tribalism, toxic masculinity, racism, you name it. Yeah, I mean, well, there are more reasons, obviously, but those are the big three that come to my mind.
Yes, but of course they need to be identified, and if you want to talk someone out of gatekeeping, you need to, pose arguments. Maybe not even base around that. Just ones that understand why they do certain things. These gatekeepers don't think they're racist. Most of them don't. They don't think they're hateful people. They just believe that they're protecting whatever they enjoy from bad people, whoever they might be. Because now why they think certain people are bad people is where the problems come in.
And that's why moderation is needed on spaces need to be moderated, because if you take a approach of free speech for everybody, or to use the phrase free speech über alles, you then leave it as an open forum for anyone to be as racist or bigoted as they want and drive people out. And because you are not moderating that space and keeping it safe for people to be in, then your space is only going to be filled with people who are comfortable with racism or bigotry or misogyny. And if they're keeping people out, then what kind of community do you have? The only community you have is a community of bigots. And that's what you're left with.
It's kind of what happened to 4chan, partially because, obviously, of the lack of moderation. But I don't believe everyone on 4chan is bad, but I do believe everyone on 4chan is sad. It's either people who are hateful or who have so little respect for themselves that when they just say anything and get called like 50 different slurs from like 80 different ethnicities, they just don't care because they're so numb. They're like so numb to other people's hatred. They're like completely numb to other people's hatred because they have so little in the way of like self-esteem and self-respect.
And if they don't have any self-respect, they're not willing to respect others.
Yes, because, and also because they don't believe they also believe that's the best they can have sometimes.
Yeah, it's
like
weird
consistent that
it's weird how when you have no self-respect and no self-esteem, you don't feel you deserve any a lot of the time, so you just don't seek it out. You don't try and better yourself. Like
yes, it's like if we're already on a semi-tangent from this all
relates. It's fine.
From gatekeeping to like straight up psychology, there is the whole thing that people can both be simultaneously like victims and abusers.
Oh God, yes. Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, that is
absolutely.
That is not only possible but common. Like,
oh my God,
historical examples of it. I'll put it that way.
I have a good example,
a
real good example, and this is I'll just go back part of the story. And I was in church one day, and this guy starts from the pulpit, starts attacking someone. It's a long story from the NAACP, but he attacks Buddhists, he attacks gay marriage, and he attacks Caitlyn Jenner. And I said, well, I almost kind of agree with the last one, and here's why. Caitlyn Jenner is the only anti-trans woman I have ever seen. It's odd.
Okay, only one you've seen, because there's more, but let's carry on.
The only one I've seen, and she has actively campaigned against trans children in sports. And I'm sure there must be a lot of other examples out there. But the thing is, you have a lot of people who are like that. And if they get insulted or if they think their community has to say a certain way, they don't realize that you can end up being the last person in your little community or your little view of the world. And people fail to realize that, or they fail, like Spaz talked about, they realize that one day you could be in the same boat. And, now I won't get into it, but the same person that attacked everybody from the pulpit is now in the other boat himself.
And a lot of that comes down to the voting for the leopards eating your faces party.
Oh, that's
but not my face, right? Right? Not my face? Yeah. No?
Explain the analogy to the chat.
Okay. So, voting for the leopards eating your faces party. There's a meme, and I've shared it on the Discord before, of a leopard next to a deer, and the deer is being told by the leopard, this is why you should vote for the leopards eating your faces party. And the deer says, but not my face, right? And then gets a blank look from the leopard. But not my face, right? So, voting against your own interests is very similar to what Julie was just talking about. It's being both in a position of being marginalized and also marginalizing others further within that same subgroup, or who would have less of a chance. It's getting up a ladder and then kicking out the ladder from under you. So now you've climbed up, but you've made the process a lot harder for the people who are coming from behind you to follow that same sort of path. Yeah, that's the one, Julie. Thank you.
Right.
I posted in the chat, but and I've encountered a lot, and I know there's some dispute about what happened with CCP, but you think about how I was infamous at one point in that community because I said, look, some people like me just want to mine, relax, and ultimately I got attacked just for wanting to do that. And the community thought, well, this is the way we want it, and nothing bad can ever happen. And then things like what happened is CCP had to start closing their offices, and they overextended themselves. And there was this group called Permaband that was consisted of some of the devs, and they had this little song they used to play at conventions, "Harden the F up." But, now I'll just bet they're not hardened the F up anymore. So it's like Span said, if you're inclusive of the community, of other people, it can only benefit the community. And when you're talking to someone, you never know, because people think they're hiding behind the veil of anonymity. And I did an experiment once. I heard somebody in a game, and we've talked about this game here in the past, but so I won't go into it. But this person was just haranguing this other person. I said, that person thinks he's anonymous. Let's see how anonymous. I started out with just his handle, right? Within 15 minutes, I knew exactly where he lived, where he worked, and where he went to college. And so you're not as anonymous as you think you are. And one of my very good friends, just because she lives in Georgia and doesn't have an accent, she was in the game that shall not be mentioned, Chris Roberts. But
you can
she
mention
was,
it's fine.
She was working as kind of like a journalist for Star Citizen, and she doesn't have any kind of a Southern accent at all. And people started in on her about African Americans, and she just waited for them to give enough rope to hang all of them, and said, "Well, newsflash, I'm black." And then, I hope you like the journalism I did, because you're not getting any more. Bye. So you never know, if you're trying to gatekeep, who's on the other end of the line.
True. Have you guys? Good.
I'll expand on that, actually. When it comes to gatekeeping, there is another really sinister aspect to it, and it ties back into accessibility. And I didn't mention this during the accessibility podcast, but I really should have. It's taking someone who is able to do something despite their disability, and then using them as a cudgel to say, well, this person is able to do this, therefore you don't need these accessibility features.
Say it with me, model minority.
Yeah. And being Asian myself, I am very, very well aware of the idea of being considered a model minority. Let me be very, very clear. There are a lot of Asians who are horrible at math.
Explain to the chat what model minority is if we're doubly down on it.
No.
Oh, of course.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Come on.
During the 80s,
Funny.
a phenomenon showed up, a very horribly racist phenomenon, especially in the US, of using Asians as a model minority to point to, and I hate to say this because it is true, to point to black people and say, look, these people are a minority too, but they're excelling. Why aren't you?
America, you put them in internment camps just 40 years before that. America. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, the facts are this. The Chinese Exclusion Act, which was extended to include people, including my own parents, who were not able to emigrate to the U.S. until the mid to late 60s, because, hey, the civil rights movement actually fought to change immigration laws. They were fighting gatekeeping that were keeping my parents from being able to become citizens of the U.S. So, this is a big deal,
Thank you for making the connection for me. I had to just explain in chat that, yes, from gatekeeping to discrimination is not that much of a leap.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
It really isn't. And so the same civil rights leaders who were fighting for Black people to get the right to vote. We're also the same people who were fighting for my parents to be able to emigrate to the US. So that's kind of personal to me, and I'm very thankful for their work, because otherwise I would not have been born here. But during the 80s, hey, going back to that, a lot of the people who emigrated during the early 70s and had the money to do so were affluent. Therefore, they could afford to put their kids into good schools. And so this is where it ties in to being the model minority. Because, yeah, a lot of people who could have afforded to emigrate and weren't refugees, they were able to put their kids in good schools and then get pointed to as a quote-unquote model minority by white people. However, while this was going on, people who had come over as refugees, their kids didn't necessarily have the same opportunities. So while you say people from certain countries, certain Asian countries, did well as Americans, people who came over as refugees didn't necessarily have the same opportunities because they came over very poor, maybe with the clothes on their backs. So there is that too. And that part of it tends to get forgotten in this whole model minority gatekeeping bullcrap, because there is no other way for me to put that without being angry about it.
Oh, the comment section is going to be spicy under this one, and I'm all for it.
Bring it on.
I have another real world example, and this is my mother.
I was going to ask
model
about
minority.
I was going to ask about real world examples of all this, so please
Go ahead.
Here's a real world example, and this is that happened to my mother. And there are still people in this world that hate disabled people of any kind of disability. And I obviously I can't go into it, but there was a congressman, because the person is still a congressman, who didn't want those kind of people in his neighborhood. So I recused myself from the project, and I told my then supervisor, I said, you can tell the congressman what I said he can do with it in so many words. My mother was a speech therapist, but I was raised by a mother with cerebral palsy, and people would see her walk and think she's stupid. And I'd say, well, my mother spent her life teaching people who are deaf how to speak. What did you do with yours? And so a prominent charity, and again, I won't tell you which one because they're still a prominent charity, she went there for a job. And this was back in the day when there's such things as job quotas. And she was very qualified. And like I said, she taught people who were deaf how to speak. But at the end of the interview, the interviewer says, well, walk across the floor for me. And she said, well, why? What are you talking about? And it turns out he was going to offer her the job, not because she was very qualified, but because she would be used as an example and fill the disability quota spot. And so she walked across the floor for him and out the door, and ended up working at the county home.
Ow.
Yeah, that sort of thing happened, and I'm sure it still happens in some places, because people who do not have the frame of reference to deal with people who are disabled, they just don't have that empathy because they don't have a reason to. They weren't forced to have any sort of empathy for other people because of exposure to people with disabilities or people of other races. They've been in this insular bubble, and anything that threatens the existence they have within that bubble is seen as an outsider, a threat to the tribe, or whatever they believe that tribe to be, even though they may be a very, very tiny minority within that tribe. They think they rule it.
There's a lot of people who don't believe in karma. And I said, I understand that. I've been attacked for being Christian and Buddhist in an office. People have screamed at me and said, you can't be both. You have to make a decision. But So I tell people, I said, well, you don't believe in karma. Think of it the way my old NCOIC used to say, what goes around comes around. And so now the very person who, from the pulpit, attacked minorities, who attacked Buddhists, who attacked trans people, is himself disabled and can no longer be a deacon.
Oh, boy. So we have a question from the chat. Is pay to win a form of gatekeeping? Do y'all think?
That's all right. Dragging this back to games, yeah.
It can be. It can be.
I think it can be.
And
I think it absolutely can be. Yeah.
I say it can be because there is a sense of, if you are playing a game where the top ranking people are people who have paid into it hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, and you're not in that group of people who have paid, especially if that game is pay to win, yeah, you're going to be pushed out. You're going to feel pushed out because you don't have thousands of dollars to spend on a game.
Fernando follows up. He thinks gatekeeping in games should be an honest statement of the game to avoid players misunderstanding the game. Huh. So does that mean, like, if you have a form of like pay to win and gatekeeping your game, you should be upfront about it? Is that, I'm not sure if that's what he's saying. Honestly. Like, how do you, if you have a game, how do you say, or would you say even like, hey, we only want certain people playing this game? Like, would you ever say that?
No. I'll give an example. There are PvP MMOs that are designed with the idea that you're going to have the very top players play not at a certain skill level, but because they have paid in. Lots and lots of money have been paid in order to get the best stuff. And if it's things like buying consumable ammo that is premium ammo, then they are going to be playing on a level that is well above what the free players can cope with. So if you try to play at that level, even if you have the skills, they would tell you to not play on that level because they expect you to be a whale like they are. And they'll try to keep you out. It's not the devs who are doing this precisely. It's the community that forms around that meta.
Right, but
and they are gatekeeping the players out, the other new players out.
But I mean, the developers created a game that fosters that kind of behavior with the pay to win exclusivity to a point. So
right.
I think what Fernando is saying is the developers should be clear about they're expecting a certain type of community for their game. I think that's what is that what you're saying, Fernando? I'm not 100.
That's pretty much how it sorts out, though, doesn't it? Because when you have a case like that, where it's a PvP game, and those who pay are going to be at the very top, and those who don't pay are not going to reach the top. They may be good, but they won't reach the top level. You'll have a pyramid of the people who have paid at the top of the pyramid, the people who are skillful but have not paid as much in the middle of that pyramid, and then you will have everybody else at the bottom. That's how it will sort out.
See, I contrast the idea of a developer saying this is the kind of game that we do, and it's going to take a certain kind of player. And I can think about the FromSoft game. So it's like, okay, it's not going to be really casual friendly. So that's one thing. It's developed like that. But the contrasting idea is when you have a game like Cuphead and the developer said, well, we didn't set out to make this kind of easy game, a difficult game, but then when they put in an easy mode into the game, the community screamed bloody murder, said like it somehow took away from them, from the community, if other people could finish the game like they could, even though they're casual players.
Yeah, there is that. But there is another aspect to it, which is kind of funny to me. The speedrunning community is...
this is going to be a fun one.
No, actually, no. This is... No, hear me out. Hear me out. The speedrunning community is actually very accepting of the people who actually do the speedruns. They are very accepting of the idea of accessibility options for other players, because even though they specifically will not use those accessibility options for their speedruns, they won't play on easy mode, obviously. It doesn't make sense. But
unless that's the category.
Unless that's their thing, and that's cool. Not having any sort of problem with that. But what I'm saying is, those people don't have a problem with easy modes being there. The people who actually who create a problem for accessibility options being added to games are people who are more casual about the games and don't actually do the speedruns. They're the ones who complained about being able to pause in games like Dark Souls being an issue, because some people have chronic pain and they may need to pause the game so they can stop because they can't continually play without pausing.
Wait, can you not pause in that game? Can you not pause in?
You can't.
What?
The game goes on and you...
Because it's always online, technically speaking.
Yeah. So, if you have a game you can't pause and you have chronic pain, well, you're kind of kept out by a design decision you have no control over. And just to say, well, this game is not for me, that should be because you don't like that genre or a specific type of gameplay. It shouldn't be because you don't have enough accessibility options to make it playable for you.
So I think what people are saying, like what Marsha's saying and what Fernando is saying, is like, maybe on their Steam page, should they say something like, this is a hard game, we don't allow pausing, you're going to die a lot, and what we expect is to keep failing until you get better. Like,
it's something. Should they being upfront about it?
That's what I think. That's what they're saying. Should they be explicit about what they expect of their players? I think is what they're saying, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, sometimes I'll see that on Steam pages where they'll say, this is a very hardcore game. This is a very
hardcore game. Yeah,
you're going to die a lot.
You're walking into.
Yeah, and I do appreciate when they do that. Because then I'm like,
you're right, Fernando. You're right.
Because then
just a theory, but I'm almost 100% sure that people that complain about easy modes in games are the same that demand cheat codes the day of release. Yeah.
Wait, there are people who demand cheat. There are people who demand cheat codes.
Yep.
He's saying that people who complain about easy modes being added to games also demand cheat codes, and I think there's a significant overlap there. Yeah.
Why would people demand cheat? I don't okay.
A good example of being upfront about difficulty in your game is when DayZ was in its infancy, Rocket Hall put up right there on his little splash page, talked about permadeath, average lifespan 90 minutes. So, hey, at least he was upfront about it.
I mean, honestly, yeah, it's about managing expectations.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and the developers, to some extent, are not 100% responsible for the community that fosters around their game.
No.
But there is some responsibility there, that if you are the developer of a game and your game is starting to have this mentality of you need to be this good in order to enjoy this game. And I'm saying that as holding up an imaginary line and saying you need to be this good or don't play. That is kind of gatekeeping. And it's coming more from the environment that the devs created and allowed to continue. Because if you have a game like, say, Scourgebringer or Celeste, where lots of accessibility modes were added, lots of them were added to make... Celeste, for example, has a mode where you can slow down time, and you have this slow time sort of thing, and you can do the platforming a lot easier. You don't have to use it, but it's there for the people who need it, and that's awesome. It made the game so accessible that I got a lot of rewards for accessibility.
that's cool.
So you can make a game like that where people can play it on the most hardcore of hardcore modes, and you can leave those easy modes in for people who need them, and then people can tailor their experience. You don't have to make it so hardcore that you're limiting the people who are able to play because of their disabilities.
I mean, unless that's
they should be able to play in spite of them.
Unless that's what these developers want. They want to, keep it pure or whatever. Maybe that's what some of them want. I don't know.
Maybe they do, but if they do that, they are doing it at the expense of people who would otherwise be able to enjoy their game, but can't because they're physically incapable of doing so.
Yeah. Like I think a lot of people can enjoy Far Cry 6, which we just finished, because of all the accessibility options and whatnot.
Yeah, there are so many. You can change colors for interactable objects. You can change the color for the HUD. You can change you can toggle on the directional sound. So it'll tell you there was an explosion X many meters that way. So even if you can't hear, or if you are hard of hearing like I am, you have the ability to say, okay, there was something over there. I should probably pay attention to that. And that's a great thing. Accessibility options are good, and the more of them there are, the more normalized there are, the better it is for everybody. Because everybody's going to need some accessibility options at some point, and we're getting back to that. Which is why, if you're hearing this and you're thinking gatekeeping is still a good thing, sincerely, rethink your life. Rethink your life decisions, and maybe get out of our community because we don't want you here.
I don't think
we're not the kind of person. We had one during the accessibility show, and they've gotten banned.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Oh, they took it so personally.
They took it very personally that people wanted accessibility options.
That's right. I forgot about that. They took it so personally, like we were attacking them. Why would you think we're attacking you, sir?
And I'm sorry to say, it was definitely a sir.
It was absolutely. Hey, one speed, come on. Again, we talked about positive gatekeeping, and sometimes you gotta kick people out. Sometimes.
The paradox of tolerance actually does apply here. It's if you allow people who are intolerant within your community, then it will drive people who are tolerant out of the community because they won't feel welcome. And then you will only be left with intolerant people. So if you want to have a good community, you do have to moderate it, and you do have to keep it tolerant to the tolerant people.
Yeah. It's funny. I've never heard of the paradox of tolerance until just now. I've never heard of that.
We've talked about it before. It's come up on the show more than once.
Has it?
But
wow.
It's a key point of my moderation style. If you have a community and you get the community that you foster, then you get the community you deserve. And if that's what you're left with, then you deserve that because you made it so.
Well,
and so that's the only good kind of gatekeeping, is keeping the bigots out.
Yeah, keeping the negativity and the toxicity out. That is very important. It's hard to do that in real life too. You kind of got to moderate your life really to keep the toxic people out.
And sometimes the toxic people find you anyway.
Yeah, like I've said this before. One of my oldest friends, he refuses to get vaccinated, and it's like, okay, I just can't anymore with you. I just can't anymore with you. Can't do it.
Anyone who is anti-vaccine is dead to me, and I say that literally because if I get COVID, I will not survive it. So For me, anyone who is anti-vax is a problem for me. An inherent threat to me. I can't spend any time around them. I can't be around them, and I don't want to be.
Yeah, Brodo Sam, I think community gatekeeping is a problem with just about any game. Like, if you go to the forums for any specific game, just that's not even Steam forums, just like if they have a forum for their game and you go there, oh boy.
They can be very passionate and very opinionated.
That's a nice way to. That's a very polite, nice, kind, maybe overtly kind way to put it. I just, even though we've talked about gatekeeping for the last hour, I still don't understand it. Like, I don't. Like, wouldn't you want as big and inclusive community as possible? I mean, don't we all benefit from that? Aren't we all better because we get along and we share our love of a thing and we take joy in that love of a thing and we share the joy with each other? Like, why wouldn't you want that? I just,
for most people, that's how their fandom is. For most people, their fandom is inclusive. It's, hey, you love this thing that I love, so let's talk about it. Let's nerd out together. That's great, and that's one of the things we do in our community because we are passionate about what we do here. Games our devs make, so of course we're passionate about that. But not all communities are like that because they feel they need to be insular, they need to be tribal. They need to keep out the, and I hate to use this phrase, filthy casuals, who are maybe not as, just because someone is not as much of a fan as you are, that doesn't mean that they cannot become that much of a fan.
You're all still fans. You're all still fans.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you found a game today or if you found it 20 years ago. A fan of a game is still a fan of a game. Just like with any sort of media. If you're a fan of a thing, then you are a fan of that thing, and nobody can tell you otherwise, or nobody should tell you that you are not as much of a fan of that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll all get along better as a community if we allow ourselves. If we allow ourselves that. If we allow ourselves to be more open and welcoming instead of so closed.
It does require empathy. It does definitely require a passion and a caring for not just what you like, but understanding that other people might not like the thing that you like in the same way that you like it. So, someone who, say, for example, loves Star Wars, may have grown up with the original trilogy. Or they might have grown up with the prequel trilogy. And they most likely would both consider themselves to be fans. But it's on the person who grew up with the original trilogy to say to the person who grew up with the prequel trilogy, you're as much of a fan as I am. Your fandom is just as valid as mine.
Ugh.
Even if it's not the same way that you liked it, it doesn't matter. Because they're fans too, and they deserve that respect. Because if someone who, say, grew up with the original series of Star Trek came across someone who had only started The Next Generation yesterday, and they said, you're not as much of a fan as I am, well, why would that matter?
Yeah, it doesn't.
What does that
matter.
accomplish by telling them you're not as much of a fan?
I'm so happy you've started to watch Star Trek. That should be what you say. Oh, welcome.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're trying this thing. I hope you like it as much as I do. And if you do, great. And if you don't, oh well.
It is all about the idea that somehow, like, if you let in the wrong people into a thing, it'll somehow make the thing worse. It all boils down to it. It's the only, because it's either people who just, don't think, or people who at least try to rationalize it, and the only rational explanation for gatekeeping is if you believe that, certain types of people joining into a fandom and doing and wanting to do a certain thing will make the thing worse.
And I can only think of one example in which that is actually true.
I'm listening.
Okay. I'm going to get into it because, sure, why not? We're already here. Crusader Kings. and the white supremacy that is very rampant within a large section of that community.
Oh, really?
You're gonna have to elaborate.
I didn't know this.
The Crusader Kings games, as popular as they are, they do have a large contingent of white supremacists who are fans of it because of the phrase Deus Vult. They really love their crusading because guess what? They're white supremacists.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So
I didn't know that.
That is one case. That is one case in which I would say those people who are really passionate fans, they also happen to be white supremacists. And yeah, that's a problem because it keeps a lot of people who otherwise would like that series out of enjoying the game. Because while they like the game, they don't like that particular fandom. Because that fandom is not kicked out of the community.
Okay.
That's
Well,
so
God,
Yeah.
son of a
we're an hour in.
fuck.
I don't think we could. I don't think we could top this. I'd
don't-
say we start wrapping this up.
I can't. Oh, the Hearts of Iron community has a similar problem. Oh God.
Right.
Oh,
Right, it does. It
God,
does.
no.
Because, yeah, because Deus Vult, the phrase is literally God wills it. And there is a big community within that community.
Hearts of Iron 4 is worse in that regard, though. That's should surprising because that means 0 people.
God, that makes. Does Paradox do anything about this? Let me just ask. Did they
try?
They try to get the more blatant stuff off of their forum, to their credit.
That's good, I guess.
But then there are the fan communities that have sprung up
that they can't stop.
Site.
Yeah, they can't.
And they
stop
can't stop that.
They're doing what they can, I imagine.
Well, that's good, I guess. I was hoping. Oh God. Okay. Well, I think I learned a lot today. I figured this would be a show where I would step back and listen, because sometimes, folks, it's okay to step back and listen. If someone has a different experience from you, it's how you learn and become a better friend and a better ally. And right now, a lot of people need friends and allies, my friend, especially in America. Dear God. Did you hear about what happened on Friday? Half of our population lost some of their rights. Anyway.
Oh, this. Right.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. And hey, just so you know, just FYI, those who are cheering that decision, just be aware that the Loving versus the state of Virginia decision is also on the chopping block as a result of that. And that particular decision is the one that enshrined interracial marriage as being legal.
You're going off the assumption that the people who...
I know absolutely that there are people who are cheering that decision right now. And yeah, they are very well aware of that implication and they don't care.
No, they encourage it.
Anyway,
there's
a bit of anger and sadness amongst us right now, so I apologize. But we're gonna call it here, I think. Folks,
before this gets completely out of hand.
I guess I want to say is, folks, if you see gatekeeping happening in front of you in a community or wherever, please call it out. Please don't just be silent. Please call it out and call it out for the bullshit that it is.
But also call out anyone that is just causing people suffering. I'll put it that way.
Well, that too. But in terms of gatekeeping, at least, yes. When you see something like that, just please call it out. Don't be silent. Don't let it go. Just if
you're silent, it only enhances the status quo and keeps it going.
Exactly.
And if the status quo is one of abuse or toxicity, then you have just contributed to that problem by not saying anything.
Yeah,
don't be a bystander.
We need to support each other and make the world a better, more tolerant place of everyone. And one of the ways we can do that is calling this kind of bullshit out when we see it. So if you see this kind of bullshit in a forum, on a Steam forum, on a Discord, wherever, please call it out. Please, even if that gets you banned, at least do the right thing and call it out. Please, because again, we live in a goddamn society. And we have to support each other. We're not just individual islands, for Christ's sake. So I want to thank the chat, especially today. Very great chat. I want to thank especially our community for being as wonderful and inclusive and supportive as it is. Our community is one of my biggest sources of joy in my life. I think the only bigger sources are my close friends, my cats, and my wife. Not in that order. And so I want to thank you all for being as wonderful as you are. So next week on the show, we are going to talk, I believe we're going to wax poetically and fondly about micropros. They're back. There's kind of a zombie micropros going on right now. And it's
a whole thing.
It's exciting.
It's what we're going to be discussing next week.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about old and new micropros. Because if you're a gamer of a certain age, you think micropros and you go, oh. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. And tomorrow, since I'm not doing TFX anymore, I'll probably be playing more Warhammer Inquisitor on stream. So
nice,
because TFX is TFX kind of has its own gatekeeping. Stupid game.
I'll have to ask you about that one because I wasn't there for the stream.
It forces you to go through 10 training missions before you can go to the campaign. You have to cheat to get around that, and
it's
not
good that they have 10 training missions,
but they're not good training missions. Like the training mission I've been stuck on was, our forces are going to be attacked by this like line of tanks and stuff. Protect our forces. That's all it says. It doesn't give you any specifics. It doesn't tell you which targets to attack.
Oh, I see.
It's just this kind of nebulous,
Figure
protect
it out.
Yeah, and I think after 10 attempts, I just gave up.
Right, let's wrap this up before we...
Anyway, so yeah, we'll see you... We'll see you on the stream tomorrow and on the podcast next week, folks. Thank you so much for being as great a community as you are. Be safe, be well, take care of each other. And if you haven't yet and you can, please get vaccinated. That's the best way we'll all get through this. The pandemic is still happening. A lot of people don't think it is. The pandemic is still happening. And we got to get through this. So as few of us die as possible. God. So thank you so much for listening and for chatting. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye, everyone.